Insanity. Insanity was the word that echoed in the young noble's mind as he strode along the main road of the Altus Plateau. There was no other reason to justify why he had accepted the suicidal mission entrusted to him. Wandering the night outside the walls of Leyndell after the shattering of the Elden Ring was certainly a death sentence. It was for a noble cause, of course, he repeated to himself constantly, trying to stay focused on his mission. Furthermore, he was protected. He had brought 4 personal guards for his escort and was camouflaged by one of his family's relics. Despite the numerous ramifications of his bloodline, his distant descent from Godfrey had gifted him with one of the magical veils, which now transformed him into the likeness of a soldier. To an outside observer, they were merely guards patrolling the plateau roads toward the lift that descended to Liurnia. A sigh of relief escaped him as he identified the distant silhouettes of the golems guarding the lift entrance. They were reaching the next safe point of the journey to Stormvale, and anxiety made them quicken their pace. Not far away, hidden behind a tree, a shadow followed the movement of the group of strange soldiers. Whoever they thought they were fooling with that disguise, they could not escape the trained eyes of a hunter. With firm and controlled movements, he pulled the string of his longbow and fired. Struck in the shoulder, the wounded soldier alerted the others of an ambush, and the group went into a state of high alert, circling the noble with their brass shields. The sudden movements broke the illusion, revealing the target to the hunter. He could smell the panic. Dazed, they chose to remain on the defensive, motionless, shields raised, eyes searching intently for the source of the shot. With his target exactly where he wanted, the hunter smiled and raised his bow to the sky, the tree covering his position from the soldier's view. As he fired into the starry sky, the observed parabola of his arrow found the path unobstructed by shields, fatally hitting his target in the head. By the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. With their master fallen, the soldiers beat a hasty retreat, leaving the noble's body sprawled by the side of the plateau road. While collecting his target's ear as proof of his completed mission, the hunter clearly heard the cursing of the noble's spirit. By now, he was accustomed to his ability to see spirits. A part of him was amused, emboldened by hearing the complaint of those who perished by his arrows. A smaller part, however, felt shame. It felt fear. After countless targets downed, and an equal amount of curses and hauntings received, was his future condemned by those he had killed? In times of peace, the lands between were never necessarily a safe place. Even in the Altus Plateau, near the capital and the demigods, crimes of all scales were committed against the unwary or those brave enough to stray from the main road. Since the removal of the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring, it was no surprise that the people would become more reckless and aggressive. Khai entered the underworld at a young age, discovering his vocation for archery as soon as he conducted his first hunt. As he grew, however, hunting animals no longer satisfied him. He established himself as a mercenary for the capital, performing dirty work for lesser houses and underworld agents. For him, the sense of power he gained from his service was incomparable. During the shattering, his work was in high demand. He had no alliances, no interests. All that mattered was satisfying his ego and getting paid for it. It was this attitude, however, that brought him notoriety and eventually led him to become the prey of other hunters. Many tried to hunt the mercenary over the years, but few came close, until one, stood out to Khai, his technique different from the rest. He was a Ravenmouth assassin, a member of a cult of fanatics who killed in the name of extinct deities. Khai didn't give a damn about those details, but he felt that here was a challenge worthy of him. He began hunting the Ravenmouths one by one, his arrogance eventually leading him to fall into a trap set by one of them in Sage's cave. When he least expected it, he was pushed into a pit, falling an immense distance and hitting the ground in complete darkness. Humiliated and furious, Khai stood up, but had no time to process where his arrogance had led him. And as he raised his bow and fired, he saw two enormous eyes of white fire light up. A death bird stared at him from up close, an omen he had never seen before, despite being able to see spirits. Khai stood, hypnotized before the creature, observing how the spirits of other warriors were framed in the bird's black wings. For the first time, Khai wondered if he would survive a conflict. Before he could react, the bird attacked. Using its ghostflame, it burned the hunter's body in colorless flames, his screams echoing forever within the pit, serving as a reminder for future visitors. As he felt his consciousness fade, Khai wondered if his actions deserved this punishment. However, he was not met by darkness. Lifted by an unknown force, he floated swiftly over an unknown city in an unknown world, surrounded in mist. He crossed structures made of dark material and tall towers, streets bustling with what he deduced were spirits watching the strange traveler cross the sky with curiosity. Unable to stop his progress, he could only aim his dazed gaze at the strange landscapes passing by. The city seemed to stretch infinitely, the distant buildings resting on the horizon. Amidst countless towers, he felt he was heading toward the largest of them, imposing and majestic, like the earth tree itself, a red light shining at its peak. That was when his direction changed. Now he ascended towards the top of the tower, and bathed in the ruby light, he saw that he had reached his destination. Floating above the tower, dozens of death birds awaited him in the pale sky, forming a circle with the tower at its center. Terrified, Khai tried to free himself from whatever held him in the air, shouting for help to the spirits below, but to no avail. The death birds began to squawk, a maddening cacophony that reignited the spectral flames on his body, making him freeze and burn once more. Screaming, Khai begged for his life, or for his spirit, whatever remained of him in this spectral form. But if they heard him, the birds paid no attention. When they all looked up at the sky, Khai followed with his eyes wreathed in white flames. He noticed that the sun of this place was enormous and completely black, a darkness so terrifying and infinite that Khai wondered if it was truly a sphere or a hole. And, as if looking through a keyhole, he saw a figure form within the circular frame, approaching. When it came close enough to emerge, the white lights of the spiritual fire illuminated its features, and Khai looked in horror at himself. Feeling the flames cover his body completely, Khai felt them changing him, transforming him, preparing him for the grand finale of some nefarious ritual never seen before. Both his body and his weapons were transformed. Amidst the extreme pain, Khai could not see the gift he had received, until his body succumbed to the extreme cold of the flames, and for the second time, death claimed him. And for the second time, he returns. Upon opening his eyes, he realizes something is different. He is different. A strange, alien energy dwells within them. A mantle of black feathers rests upon his shoulders, and his weapons have been modified just as they were in that spirit world. Dazed and filled with countless questions, a voice echoed in his mind, like a thought, yet a thought that was not his own. You may step aside, child. Your mission has ended, but mine has only just begun, the voice explained. Khai tried to reach for his weapons immediately, but his body did not obey. Not out of fear, but because it now belonged to another master. With growing horror, Khai watched his body obey the invader's commands, standing up and retrieving his weapons. As he watched, his body climbed the rocks of the pit with ease. He screamed for help in his mind, knowing the thought would never escape his stolen lips. Khai felt tiny, helpless, imprisoned in his own body by a force of cosmic proportions. He could only watch. He observed as they escaped the cave and eliminated the terrified assassin who had thrown him into the pit. The man looked as if he had seen a ghost, and perhaps that wasn't far from the truth. He died burned by the ghost flame that his body was now capable of manifesting. What had he become after all? What was the purpose of that entity? What was the place where his spirit had been taken? And most importantly, why him? Although he knew the spirit he traveled with could hear his questions, Khai did not expect answers. Once again, Khai had to rely on his hunter's senses to observe and gather clues to reach a conclusion. As they traveled and burned corpses along the way, Khai understood that this was a mission of restitution. Death, the ancient death, which had been usurped and forgotten after the Golden Order. Whoever this entity was, it wanted to reinstall death back into the world and burn the earth tree in ghost flame. The ancient death rituals that led brave warriors to paradise were not just legends after all. Only when their mysterious journey led them to the Dragon Barrow did he understand the invading spirit's goal. It sought the rune of death, held by Marika's half-brother Malekith. Watching from a distance, Khai and the Harbinger shared the same anticipation, their eyes scanning Gurung's temple. Protected by the guardians wielding destined death, the Harbinger did not want to take risks. All that remained for him was to wait for the right moment. And so, unable to retrieve the rune of death, Khai accompanies the Harbinger as he travels through the lands between, executing another stage of his plan. Year after year, eliminating corpses in ghost flame, destroying those who live in death, and bringing back the funeral rites of the deathbirds. Little by little, the inhabitants noticed the return of the ghost flame, a nostalgic memory inherited from past generations. And while the Harbinger rebuilds his creed, one corpse at a time, Khai searches for the one who will free him from his prison. For someone who once imagined himself as death incarnate, what he wants most now is to be rid of such responsibility. After bringing death to so many individuals, regret shatters his personality. What he desires most now is simply to live.